And we're live. Welcome to Music Matters 2020. I'm your host, Jason Tramm, and I'm delighted that you can join us for our unique podcast community. Today, we're broadcasting live from historic Founders Park in Ocean Grove, New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore, and we're delighted to have you here. As is the case in Music Matters 2020, we delve into the issues and the events of classical music and this time as we see them through the eyes of distinguished colleagues. And today we have a wonderful opera agent, Peter Randsman, who's going to join us today. Peter has been in the business a very long time, and he's a wonderful, positive energy and a man who has done so much good in the community. We're delighted to welcome Peter Randsman. Welcome, Peter.
Well, hello there. I'm thrilled to be here. Thrilled. And I have to tell you, you, Jason, are a perfect example of someone who took this situation that we're in presently, which is really pretty upsetting and scary, turned it around, and look what you've created, this wonderful show that you're hosting. And I'm just thrilled for you. I'm excited, and I'm also really honored that you chose
Peter, I
to
couldn't
be a
think of
guest.
anyone more who's got that positive energy and with the quality of your work and the time you've done it. I think it's great and you also have a wonderful story. I can't wait to tell your story to our audience. And thank you so much for being here today. So, how did you begin your journey? I know you've been in the performing arts as a performer. So, tell us about your performing.
It even goes way back and before that. And if I dig back and I think about even what I was told by my parents, I was born in Long Beach, Long Island, not to be mixed up with Long Beach, California. You tell people you're from Long Beach. And I was raised in a place called Harbor Isle, which is about 10 minutes away from Long Beach. My mother told me that when I was young as about 4 or even 5 years old, I would go over to the piano. We had a piano in the lower level, the basement level, and I would start playing. And I would start playing songs and melodies that I liked out of nowhere, had no musical, knowledge or training. My parents were not musical, so my mother always would think, what's going on with this kid? What's happening with him? And it just kept continuing. I remember we had a 45. I don't know if anyone's old enough out there to remember 45s. They were small, one song on one side and one song on the other side. And it was Mary Martin singing the two hit songs from South Pacific, which was, at that time a big, hit. And I would play them. Now, I might have been 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old, over and over. I remember it. I would play them, then I'd flip it over. But I mean like 10 and 20 times. As a kid, I don't know why, immediately, music more than anything spoke to me. And that was the beginning of my journey. And it never deviated from me. All the kids in the neighborhood would go out and play baseball and sports. And I really wasn't. What's ironic is now I love the Yankees. I'll watch a baseball game and enjoy it. And my father, may he rest in peace, as we say, got a kick out of that because he was from the Bronx. But as a kid, no interest in any of that. It was music. Then it was Broadway. And, I felt so isolated because the other kids, and my mother used to say, why don't you go out and play baseball with the boys? And I would look at my mother, and I'm not kidding, 6, 7 years old. Like I said, because I don't have the same interests as the other boys, but my mother didn't get it. You know what I mean? Slowly but surely she did. One day, my sister, Nancy Randsman Nasca, one of her closest friends is a woman named Sheila Gordon. And she'd mentioned to Sheila that me, her little brother, but I wasn't really into, the athletics and the sports like the other kids, but I had interests in the arts and different things. And she said, Peter needs to meet my brother, Ricky. So they set up on this day. I remember it like it was yesterday. Everyone was over jumping rope and playing Potsy in front of Debbie Sasso's house. And there was this guy. You want to talk about positivity, radiance, Ricky Ian Gordon. I think many of you know Ricky Ian Gordon, the composer. I don't think I was older than 6 years old, maybe 6, 6.5, 7, I'm not sure. And immediately he ran over to me and he called me Petey. And he still to this day calls me Petey. But what was fascinating is he had on a pair of penny loafers, and I had never worn penny loafers. The things you remember, Jason, right? And I said, Ricky, could I try your penny loafers on? And that's it. Best friends for life. Got it? So Ricky
what a great
and
story.
I had this, isn't that crazy? We had this bond. We both loved music. Ricky, as early as when I first met him, was sitting at that piano and composing and playing. And we had that musical bond. We took piano lessons together with Francis Fox in Harbor Isle. We would go together. My lesson would be first, then Ricky would have his lesson. And on that fateful day, Ricky said, Petey, come here. I said, yeah. He said, look at this book. And it was called The Victor Book of Opera, which is a legendary book. That one was printed, I believe, like in 1921. It was, you know, they have many of them. Some of them that are printed in the 30s, 50s, even the 70s. But this was one of the originals. So the pictures of the opera singers were from the costumes from 1910, 1915, 1920. And he showed it to me. And I said, well, I don't like that opera stuff. I like rock and roll. I love the Beatles. You know, we got all the Beatles albums. But then slowly but surely, Ricky, every time we go for a lesson, we'd look at the pictures. We'd look at Margaret Matzenauer's Kundry. We'd look at Caruso, Geraldine Farrar, these singers that had sung the turn of the last century. And Ricky started to get me, you know, more and more into it. And that's how it all started.
So how old were you when you first got into opera specifically?
Probably around 7 or 8.
So opera runs in your blood.
Because that was, yeah, runs in my blood. And it turned out, even though my mother wasn't an opera lover, she loved Broadway. My father loved opera, and he loved classical music. Now, I was on a baseball team. He was the captain. And he came to me one day. He said, you're not loving this, are you? And I said, Dad, no. And he said, you love music and theater. And guess what he started to do? Take me to the opera. And he brought me to the opera with my great Aunt Betty, my grandmother's sister, who moved here from Paris like in 1912. And she told me stories about hearing Caruso regularly, Geraldine Farrar, and all the great singers. And my first opera was in the 1967-68 season. It was New York City Opera, and I was in the rear orchestra right. Remember that. And it was Carmen, starring this tenor. And when it was over, my father said, this guy is really amazing, and I think he's going to be a star. I believe he was 27 at that time, and his name was Placido Domingo, and my dad was right. So that was when Domingo was the leading tenor of New York City Opera, and it was right before he made his Met debut in Adriana Lecouvreur at the Met. That was it. I was hooked. And then what would happen is, regularly, my dad and my mom would take me to the opera twice a year. I remember the date, November 17, because they would tell me 4 months in advance. They say, Pete, we got tickets to see Il Tritico, November 17th, 1969. So I would wait for that date. So when November 17th comes now, to me, it's all about seeing Tritico with Seymour Schwartzman, Janine Crater, you know what I'm saying? And Francesco Roberti, all these singers. My life was always about that. I remember in junior high drawing pictures of the scenery of the Von Karajan di Valkyra. Everything I did now. I remember in the late 60s, like around 67, 68, when kids would stay home from school and do bad things. We won't even talk about them. Well, I would actually stay home from school and tell my mother I was sick, and I wasn't sick. But you know what I would do? I remember the score of Die Walküre was delivered from the music store at Macy's in New York, and I wanted to stay home and play through the Walküre score and listen to the whole recording with the score. How nerdy is that? My life became, as soon as I was introduced to that sound, my father told me first about all these singers, and then one day, the fateful day, my sister had a date with her boyfriend. We were downstairs watching TV, and there was a movie on called The Phantom of the Opera, the one that was in color, okay? The later one, not the black and white. Now, this lady came out, and I got to hear what an operatic voice really sounded like. And then the doorbell rang, and my sister's boyfriend arrived, and my sister said, as loving teenage sisters will do, get out of the room, my date is here. So, of course, at that time in the old days, you only had one TV. So my father said, what's the matter? You look upset. I said, Nancy threw me out of the room, and I like that thing, that opera singing. He said, come with me. We went in the car. We drove to Oceanside, to Times Square stores, and he bought me highlights from Madame Butterfly with Leontyne Price and Richard Tucker. And that, for me, was my real formal beginning of hearing and understanding it. I read the libretto. I must have listened to that recording 500 times. I'll always remember the first time I heard Butterfly's entrance with Leontyne Price sailing up to that optional sustained D flat that so many sopranos don't like to sing. And I was hooked. And then I heard Richard Tucker. I couldn't believe it. And then the drama of the story. And then it continued on and on and on. Ricky, Ian Gordon, and I would get on a train, the Long Island Railroad, on a Sunday, go to the Metropolitan Opera, where on a Sunday you would buy standing room tickets for the next week. And I would buy tickets. And that's what we would do. We would go Friday night, Saturday afternoon, and Saturday night to the Metropolitan. And on Sunday, we would go to New York City Opera, where Norman Traeger, Beverly Sills, Suzanne Marseille, Robert Hale, Richard Fredericks, Dominic Cosa were singing, and then eventually Jose Carreras. But Sunday was the day to get up early and go in and get those tickets. And then again, I was a bad boy. You know how some people would cut class or not go to school to do bad stuff? Well, I did too, but I did that to go hear Ingrid Björner sing her Fidelio with the Met, because there was only one. That's what my life became, Jason.
So you were bitten so early by the bug, and we have our first question from the audience. Jack from New Jersey asks, were there other kids who had your passion for music besides you and Ricky and Gordon?
Yes, that's a great question. Thanks for that question. A neighbor of mine that lived about 4 houses down, his name was Danny Chaikin. His father was Jack Chaikin, who was a well-known pianist who taught at Long Island University. He was a music teacher and a piano teacher there. Eventually, Ricky and I got more advanced in piano, so we started studying with Jack Chaikin. He was more advanced. So his son Danny also became part of the three of us. And Danny and Ricky and I, it was all about that. And then one Sunday on the standing room line was this guy I had seen, same age as me and Ricky and Danny, and he just was so friendly and so nice. And we became friends, and again, best friends since mid-late 60s. His name is Arthur Levy. Arthur Levy, as many of you know out there, is a very famous, world-famous voice teacher. And so I tell everybody, me, Arthur, Ricky, the 3 short Jews, 2 from Long Island, 1 from Brooklyn, talking up a storm, and just, it was all about that. I would sit on the phone with Arthur. My parents had to get a separate line. I had to have my own phone because I was on the phone like 3 hours a night with Arthur, like pontificating about whether Inga Borg was better as Electra, or if Birgit Nilsson's middle voice was as good as Inga Borg's, but Nilsson's top was better. This is 12 years old. This is 13 years old. Think about that. So it was Arthur, and then this Daniel Chaikin, myself, and Ricky. And it was extraordinary because all the other guys, and it's interesting, all my other friends, the other guys that went to sports and everything, they loved that we had our interests. And we would tell them about it. And many of the people, when we were 13 years old, we would bring them to the opera. But I made a very, very big mistake. Strauss's Capriccio is a magnificent
great show,
piece
long.
of music. It's magnificent, but it is slow and very conversational. Well, I didn't know the piece well. I knew Die Frauenauschatten and big and exciting and high notes and scenery and epic. So they were doing Capriccio at New York City Opera. So I thought, well, it's probably going to be like Die Frauenauschatten. So I brought like 5 of my friends from Harbor Isle that had no musical background, nothing about music, and I brought them to Capriccio, and they wanted to kill me. They said, we loved the first 15 minutes, but I mean, it was like almost 2 hours, no intermission, and it's all conversational. And I thought, maybe you better think next time before you bring people to the theater, because part of the joy for me in loving classical music and opera is spreading the word, is spreading that love, is playing a game that we used to call drop the needle. When I brought that up to somebody, they're like, is that something to do with drugs? I'm like, no. Drop the needle is when we used to have record players. And we would put on like a short 2-minute section, and you'd have to name the voice, or drop the needle because somebody held a high note so long, and then you would listen and say, you've got to hear this, like that famous Montserrat Caballé. I think it's the B natural at the end of Don Carlo, which is supposed to be cut off on the count of 3, and she held it till the count of like 80. Till the curtain was down. So part of that was playing drop the needle, showing my friends who didn't know anything about music, listen to this. These people studied for years to sing in 4 and 5 languages, to stand on stages of 3,000 and 4,000 seat auditoriums with 80 to 100 piece orchestras with no microphones. And I would get people so excited they'd want to come. And then it became my responsibility and our responsibility as friends to bring them to Turandot, Carmen, and then No More Capriccio.
That's more of a connoisseur show, isn't it? I would say.
more of a connoisseur. And I love it. I love it. And it's funny. I think about 8 years ago, they did it again with Pamela Armstrong, and it was an exquisite production. And I remember sitting there, remembering what I had done like 40 years ago, 35 years ago with my friends. But it's so interesting how your musical palette changes, because I remember even as a 12-year-old sort of struggling because they did not have surtitles. Remember, back when I was a kid, there were no surtitles, so unless you studied the score in every single word, and I really didn't know Capriccio that well then, the way I know it now. So it's sort of funny.
Did people bring librettos to those shows? And I remember people used to bring their librettos.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you. There was always someone at the Metropolitan Opera who would set up a table right in the orchestra level when you first come in, who would sell librettos. His name was Kenneth T. Brooks. We were 12 and 13, and he was about 60. He was fascinated with us, me, Danny, and Ricky. Kids that age loved opera, and he would always talk to us and talk about Friedrich Schur and Herbert Janssen and Flagstedt and Martha Myrtle, singers I wasn't familiar with that was singing in the teens, 20s, and 30s that he had heard. Eventually, this is astounding, he asked to meet our parents. So he came, he lived in Brooklyn, to Harbor Isle and spent the day. He met with my mother for about an hour, he met with Danny Chaikin's mom, and then he went to Ricky's. To tell our parents, he said, your kids, they're not just kids who like the opera. They know a lot of facts. They know a lot about a lot of things of opera that most younger fans don't know. And I think he just wanted to let them know that if we wanted to in any way continue our lives or our education as we got older, that he supported it. And I know that, imagine back then in those days, a 50-year-old man, with 12-year-old kids, you don't know. Who is this person? So I think he wanted to meet them. And you know what? We went to his house in Brooklyn, and we sat there for hours. He gave us gifts. He gave us old recordings. I remember a Die Walküre recording that was now on EMI, but it was originally on RCA with Furtwängler conducting, and Ferdinand Franz and Martha Myrtle, and we went home with them. And he was such a gentleman, such a great guy. I even remember he had cataract surgery, so we wouldn't be able to be in touch with him. Back then, it was 2 months of healing, not 2 days. So when you brought up librettos, that sort of opened up another story. As you know, I love to tell stories about Kenneth C. Brooks, because it's just, Kenneth T. Brooks, I think it was. But he sold the librettos, and he would talk to people and sell the librettos of the performance of that day. Then people would go in and try to read as much of the libretto. They'd have their little flashlights, they'd read. And then, of course, he would have a few other librettos for whatever was coming up the following week and sell them. Yes, that was basically how people on the spot would educate themselves.
As a college professor, I love teaching the non-majors and hooking the people on classical music, and it's so important. What they think of opera as, until they go and understand it, they think it's just something completely abstract, and until they know what the words mean, they get the humor in the scenes, the seriousness of the interaction of emotions. The words are critical. And having a libretto, having the subtitles, it really it is crucial to introducing people to the art form for the first time.
That's such a great point. And it brings me back to when they first started that. I remember at New York City Opera, my God, it could have been 30 years ago, 28 years ago, whenever it was that surtitles began, and they started first in the New York theaters at New York City Opera. Now, Turandot was one of the first operas that Ricky and I had seen as kids with, I remember it was a matinee. It was James McCracken as Calaf, Martina Arroyo as Liu, and a German soprano was sharing the production with Nielsen named Marion Lippert, who was a Fest singer from Stuttgart. And that was my first Turandot. So what I'm saying is I have known Turandot since I'm a kid. I've studied it. I know the words. But I want to tell you something. When they first started surtitles, even as a younger person, I might have been in my early 30s, I was a little bit of a snob about it. I'm like, well, why do we need this? And Jason, I want to tell you, I remember going to see Turandot at New York City Opera. My God, and it was exciting. They had John Frederick West, fantastic tenor, Linda Kelm, Rachel Mathis, Nancy Tatum, so many interesting singers, and Faye Robinson, a great soprano as Liu, Kathy Malfitano. The cast were fantastic. I remember the first time, and I was sitting up, I used to get my tickets way up in the family circle. That's where you hear voices the best. And I remember the first time, now remember, I had seen Turandot 30 times by that point and studied it with score and libretto. But when you're sitting there in a performance and you're just sitting, and then you can see the words, that death scene from Liu, and I will never forget it. It was so moving in a way that was bumped up and different. Not that it wasn't moving when I had seen it years ago at the Met, and even years before at City Opera, before they put in surtitles. I remember that first time. People were crying their eyes out. I was so moved to tears, and I thought, this is crazy. I actually know what she's saying. But when you see it written out, and you see it, and you're sharing those words and their feelings while they're sharing their voices, it was astounding. So yes, Jason, it's a new tool. I think tools for us in this modern technical age, and that is one that, even though in the beginning I went kicking and screaming about surtitles, I am absolutely a great fan.
Yeah, it's really it's so amazing how technology changes performing arts, even classical performing arts. How the technology it opens up new things to new audiences. As we're always reinventing classical music for the modern audience, it's very interesting how technology can change it as well.
It's unbelievable. It opened up doors. It opened up chakras. It opened up even people that were friends or family who normally wouldn't listen or weren't interested, because they understood and their mind wasn't wandering. It changed everything. So I think back now to another magical day in my life. I believe I was 14, and it was after school, and I was home alone. I had just gotten home. You change, you put your clothes on to go out and play and have fun with your friends. But I put on Die Frauen Schatten, and I remember it was the recording live from Munich on DG with Ingrid Björner and Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, and I put it on. Now, throughout my life, I've been good at imitation. Many of my friends know I do a good Betty Davis imitation, and whoever's listening out there is laughing. And I do a good Ethel Merman. And to be quite honest, being that you and I are friends, you've seen them.
I've heard them both. They're wonderful. If you want to bust a little bit out, feel free.
No, I'm not going to. But what I'm saying is, I've always been pretty good with imitation. So there I was alone. I'll never forget it. And Fisher Dieskau was singing, you know, in Act 3. And I thought, oh, how cool. Let me try and imitate him. And I did, really big and really loud. And I'll never forget it. I stopped and I thought, what was that? Because it sounded real, like an opera singer. Now, I had never studied singing in my life, and I had actually never sung a note. Before that, maybe I was in chorus at school, and I was a boy soprano when I was 10, 11, and 12, but I had never sung a legit note or a solo in my life. Then, Jason, everything changed in my life. I became a closet opera singer. I didn't tell my parents, and for over a year, then something happened. I was 15. We had moved to Long Beach. Funny story. We had to get rid of our home in Long Island, and we were going to move to Florida. Well, I was so devastated that I wouldn't be able to go to the Met and to City Opera 5 times a week. That's all I thought about. When I went backstage to see Dorothy Kirsten in Tosca, I told her, and she was like, I'm so sorry. Evelyn Lear, we went backstage to her dressing room. She was trying, when I was a little younger, to get me into the children's chorus at the Met. And when I told her, Miss Lear, I'm moving to Florida, I mean, you would have thought that the worst tragedy in the world was occurring. So I remember going down to Florida. We were looking for a house, but then we decided not to move to Florida. Thank God. Nothing against Florida. It's beautiful. My family lives down there. And we decided to stay in Long Island, in Long Beach. And that's where everything changed for me. I was 15. I had a friend, my friend Ira. He was a clarinetist at Juilliard. And I said, come inside in the bedroom. I have a surprise for you. I put on the Verdi Requiem bass solo, and I sang the whole thing for him. His eyes got about that big, and he said, do your mom and dad know you can do this? I said, no, please don't say anything. He dragged me inside, made me put it on for my mother and father. Remember, they never heard me sing. And I sang, having never studied, because I was good at imitating. It was almost a professional level sound at 15, which I'm not bragging. I'm telling you, it was the ability to imitate. My mother started to laugh. My father started to cry. Then my father started to laugh and my mother started to cry. They looked at me like I was a Martian. And that was like the beginning of them realizing this is real. But I still didn't want anybody to know. So I was in high school in an opera workshop class with Theodore Bagdikian. He also was the music director of the high school shows and the chorus director of chorus in school. I wasn't doing any of that. I was too scared. I was in a rehearsal room and I was singing a few legit musical theater songs and opera arias. And I see a pair of eyes peering through and then knocks on the door. I said, yes. He said, who the hell are you? That's what he said. I said, I'm Peter Randsman. Who are you? He said, I'm Michael Hirsch. He was the president of the high school, the senior class president. He dragged me into the chorus rehearsal with about 150 choristers and Mr. Bagdikian at the piano. And he said, stop. And sweat is pouring down my face. And Mr. Bagdikian said, oh, Peter Randsman, you're in my opera workshop class. What can I do for you? And Michael said, have you ever heard him sing? And he made me sing 2 songs. Mr. Bagdikian said, class dismissed, everyone leave. He got on the phone to Arthur Kay, who was the stage director of the musicals they did there. And he called Arthur Kay to come in, and I sang for him. And Arthur Kay, and he said, we've always wanted to do Carousel. And they said, I think we found our Billy Bigelow. And I'm like, what? So they couldn't say that publicly. So the next year we moved to a new high school. Long story short, everybody auditioned, hundreds of people auditioned. And that was my first time on stage. I did the role of Billy Bigelow in high school,
About
and it
the
was
hardest
so much fun.
musical theater role there is. That's one of the really heavy ones,
You
sure.
have no idea. You have no idea how much I loved it. It was unbelievable, and it felt like I was born to be doing that. Then they did Brigadoon, and I did the role of Tommy, and then they did Arsenic and Old Lace, and I told them I don't want to do the romantic leading role, or even be considered, not do it. I don't want to be considered for it, because I had to audition if I was lucky enough to even be considered for it. I said, I'm going to do Dr. Einstein. The idea of playing character roles actually was more fascinating to me at that point. So I did that. So when I was ready to graduate high school, I thought, what am I going to do with my life? So we decided Nassau Community College, which had a wonderful, wonderful drama department, and I tried out for it. I got in, again, tried out for different shows, knowing there were, hundreds of people, and I got the role of Alan Felix in Play It Again, Sam, which is Woody Allen's play that made him famous. I played the Woody Allen role, sort of to, again, show another side of what I could do. Then there were tryouts for this beautiful musical theater Broadway show, Dames at Sea. Tried out for it. I got the leading role of Dick in Dames at Sea. Then they were doing Leonard Bernstein's On the Town in this huge outdoor amphitheater with a complete orchestra, and I got the leading role of Gaby. And On the Town, I got to sing some of the most beautiful songs Bernstein has ever written, Lonely Town. And I kept thinking, what is going on here? And it just continued. And then someone from Hofstra University, Hofstra is one of the most illustrious drama departments in the country. Lainie Kazan, James Caan, Francis Ford Coppola, Madeline Kahn, just to name a few, had graduated a few years earlier. And they came to me and said, we'd like you to try out for the drama department. And I was like, oh my God. So I tried out, I got in, and my parents were so kind. They said, even though you're 25 minutes away by car, we want you to live in the dorms so you get to feel what dorm life is like to live away. They were such great parents. And I did that and tried out for a drama, Eugene O'Neill piece called The Rope, got the leading role. Tried out for Cabaret, the Broadway musical Cabaret, got the leading role of Clifford Bradshaw. Tried out for the Shakespeare Festival, got a role in that. Terrified to even have to do a Shakespearean piece, but I just went for it. And then someone called me up to tell me that they were opening an Equity Theater in Long Island. And as a kid of 19, you realize to get your Actors Equity card, there are people of 40 years old that still don't have enough points to be in Actors Equity, so you have to do non-equity theater until you get your points. And he said to me, I want you to do Dick and Dames at Sea, Charlie and Charlie's Aunt, and this and that. And I was like, are you kidding me? And I will give you your equity card. It's an equity dinner theater, so I will give you your equity card. I didn't finish my final semester at Hofstra. And I remember Dr. Tulin, Miriam Tulin, she was amazing. She wasn't thrilled, but I respectfully thanked her and moved on, got into Equity, did those shows, moved to New York City, lived in Sheridan Square in 1976, the heart of Greenwich Village. Sheridan Square, it was the place to be. And I got an agent, a very dear friend of mine, childhood friend named Melody Breyer-Grell, who also is a fantastic singer. You know Melody. Yeah. She went to Curtis, but then she's also a wonderful jazz singer and also a writer. Melody had an agent, and she introduced me to her agent, Dolores Reed. She handled younger people. She got me a print job. I was the Minolta camera boy. And now I'm going to tell this story so singers realize when you think you can't go to an audition, think twice and make sure you're right. The phone rang. She said, hello, Peter, it's Dolores. And I said, hi, Dolores, how are you? She said, there's an audition today for Burger King. They have a new product called the Whopper, and they need a Whopper boy for a national commercial. I said, as singers will say, "Oh, Dolores, I'm sorry, I have swollen glands, my throat is killing me, I can't do it." And I know they've heard like 6,000 people countrywide, so I'm just a speck of sand. And she said, "Yeah, I see what you're saying." She said, "Shut the hell up and get the hell to that audition."
Good agent.
I'm not kidding. She didn't want to hear me. And I said, "Dolores, I don't know if I can sing." She said, "You'll sing." So I went, and I got home around 6 p.m., and Dolores called me, and I got hired. I was the Whopper boy on the national commercial when they introduced the Whopper. I was on TV 100 times a day for 2 years. So the reason I tell this story is, and I always tell the singers that I work with, I understand if you're laryngitic and the voice isn't phonating and you can't do any good to your reputation as an artist. But if you think you can, at least 60%, then it's worth going in and giving it a try. And that happened, and I got to make my Broadway debut singing 2 beautiful solos in a tribute to the Ziegfeld Follies with the original Ziegfeld ladies, some of them Doris Vinton, and some of the ladies that were there in 1905 and 1910, some of them who were 100 years old and 110, but also Ruby Keeler, the legendary movie star from the 1930s, the star of 42nd Street, and I was singing a duet with her, a duet called Liza, Liza. And Margaret Whiting was on the program. Then into my dressing room comes a gentleman that said, "Do you mind if I share this dressing room with you?" I said, "Well, no, of course not. What's your name?" He said, "Avon Long." Sport and Life, one of the most important singers of all time. I said, "Mr. Long, oh my God, I'm so grateful to meet you and to share this dressing room." And I'll never forget that. And what was ironic and typical of being a performing artist, there I was on Broadway at the Edison Theater singing these solos. There was Ruby Keeler with the most beautiful blue eyes I've ever seen looking at me before we went on, saying, "Peter, I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous." I said, "Ruby, you were married to Al Jolson. You sang this song, Liza, Liza, with Al Jolson. You starred in No, No, Nanette on Broadway. You don't need to be nervous. I'm here with you." She had had a stroke, so her left side was not moving, so I was holding up her left side, singing Liza, Liza, and she was tapping with her right leg.
What an amazing story. What an amazing story.
She got an amazing ovation, but here's the fun part. My survival job at that point was as a bouncer at a discotheque. Most people out there don't know what a discotheque is. It's a nightclub. So I finished, took off, my makeup, my this, my that, go to the disco, and people are screaming and flipping out. I said, "What's the deal?" News Center 4, Sue Simmons on Channel 4, had featured the return of Ruby Keeler to Broadway. So little did I know it was on News Center 4. So everyone that sees me, at this bar doing my survival job, as all we performing artists did at that point, there it was. So it just shows you life. And then over the next number of years, I did a number of tours. I did a wonderful tour of Kismet, starring the leading baritone of the Metropolitan Opera, John Reardon, and wonderful Sherry Overholt, who we all know and love. And it was just amazing. And some operetta tours. And then I sang at New York City Opera for 4 years. And then New York City Opera went on strike, and we thought it was going to close. And that's when my life changed. I had to make decisions. For about 8 months, there was no New York City Opera. I had no income. I didn't want to be a bouncer. At that point, I was bartending on 8th Avenue at a place called Billy's Chelsea Bar, and I was held up a few times with guns at my forehead. Chelsea at 3 in the morning. Guns at my forehead, and you have to think clearly. And one too many times with this, and I thought, okay, those survival jobs have to stop. And that's when my life changed. I went to have lunch with my friends, Alan Green and Bruce Semsky, may he rest in peace, 2 of the most important opera agents in the world. And they said to me, "You look a little down in the dumps." And I said, "I am. I don't know that I'm going to be able to sing anymore with what's going on with New York City Opera." They said, "Peter, you should be an agent." And I said the greatest line. I said, "But I didn't go to agent college." And they laughed for about 10 minutes. They said, "Peter, we believe with the knowledge that you have that you can do this. And I was like, no, I need to go to school. And they said, just sit here. They called a man named Paul Cote, a manager, an agent. Hello, Paul, did you lose your assistant? He said, yes, I just lost my assistant. They said, we're sending Peter Randsman over. 5 minutes later, I was there in Paul's office, talked to him for about 2 full hours. He said, can you type? I said, no. He said, do you know what a fax machine is? I said, no. He said, you're hired. I said, why? He said, because you can learn to do all those things, but the knowledge you have is just what I'm looking for. And that was the day my whole life changed. And here I am now. And after 6 years of working with Paul Cote, Deborah Voigt was on the roster at that time, so it was very exciting. It was so thrilling. We worked, I don't know, about 3 or 4 seasons with Deborah. I know Susan Dunn was on that roster. It was Hillier International, Kazuko Hillier, who was an entrepreneur who set up all these tours of the New York Philharmonic. So I worked there, and Paul decided to go out on his own. I stayed with him. And after 6 years, for certain reasons, I went out on my own. And here I am. It's so amazing how my journey, starting back there when I first heard the first operatic sound, I always felt like opera and music itself was like balm for my soul. It was like I always say my best drug of choice is music. And that's that long journey where I always wondered, what would it be like if I gave up performing? And I live in a wonderful place called Manhattan Plaza. Oh, it's a whole community of performing artists. And I've overheard many people say, I have to retire, and I'm very sad, and I'm this and that. And I always thought, what's it going to be like for me if I retire from being a performer and make a change? You know, never for a minute did I look back. And I haven't really sung in 31 years.
But you've been in the field. You've been so active, and you've been in the careers of other great artists, and you've been passing along your knowledge. I mean, you've been gathering that knowledge since you were a tiny child in that opera field, and now you get to pass that love of performing and that knowledge you've gained. It's an incredible turnaround.
Thank you, and it's just so interesting, like how what happened even at the beginning. Like at the beginning, I had a group of friends, you know, Alan Glassman, Andrea Del Giudice, who you know. I know Andrea she's obviously one of my best friends, and she's a very close friend of yours. But she was in a group of friends, and then, you know, she joined the roster over there at Cote Artists. So, see, a lot of people don't know that. I managed her career for a while, and then we lost sight of each other, you know, because she was living in Europe. She was fest over there with Giancarlo Del Monaco and Bonn. And then when she came back, it was like a minute hadn't gone by. And you know, we've all spent time, and she's one of the great voice teachers in the world now, and another one of my best friends, you know. And I've got a number of best friends, you know, people that you can't say I have one best friend, 2 best friends. You can have 10, 15 people that are all best friends, and all you have different dynamic relationships with them, you know. So I don't want you know how many times I'm saying best friend. But it's interesting then, as a manager and an agent, things changed and went in a whole different direction. But the challenges that were put in front of me through this new type of career, I never felt like I wasn't up to it. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying I felt capable, like I could solve the problems. And I do have to say, Paul Cote, for the 6 years I worked with him, was a great mentor. And he was very kind to me. I remember after 2 years, he sent me to Europe for 2 weeks to do all these business trips over there. And he was very kind to me. And the good thing was, we had the same kind of sense of humor. So because see, my belief is with life, you have to be able to laugh at everything, good, bad, and ugly. And maybe people out there won't agree with me, but that's basically how I was brought up. And the type of background I come from is you imbue everything with humor. My father, who lived till 96, was sort of like Jackie Mason. would be so funny. Even in being serious, he'd be funny. My mother, I had some of the hugest laughs in my entire life with my mother. So that's what I come from. So the challenges that came, instead of pulling back from them, I just, even though I felt like a salmon swimming upstream in the beginning, when you switch from being a performing artist to then being an artist manager, I was naive. I believed if you have a great voice and you're a great artist, you're going to have a major career. That's what I thought. Well, the first day at Cote Artists up there on 56th and Broadway, I woke up with 103 fever, and I called Paul Cote, and I said, I'll never forget this. And I said, you're going to think I'm making this up, but I have the flu, and I can't see it possible that I'm going to be able to be in for a week, if not two. And he said, okay. So 2 weeks later, after having one of the worst flus I've ever had in my entire life, I showed up to work for Paul to train me, my first day. And I said, where are you all dressed up for? He said, oh, I'm leaving. I have a plane to catch. I'm going away for 2 weeks for a trip. I said, but aren't you going to train me? He said, Peter, you had the flu for 2 weeks, and I totally believed you. He said, so nice to meet you, and I'll either see you in 2 weeks or have a good life. It was trial by fire. And it was funny, Jason. The phone started ringing, asking for certain artists, for certain roles, and it felt, do you ever have anything in your life that feels so organic that it doesn't feel forced? And that was the beginning.
For me, I was a singer. I was studying voice at college, and I was teaching high school, and I was a good high school teacher, and I was a pretty good comprimario tenor, and I always had singing a lot of professional chorus work. And when I did my master's degree, I studied conducting seriously for the first time. I never thought of myself as a conductor. I was just a teacher who would conduct the choir, and I would go from here to there. And I studied conducting, and then all of a sudden the clouds opened up, and the right teacher, Ed Bolkovac at the Hart School, pushed me and said, you'd be a great conductor. I'd like you to do your, just to go advance your studies. And then life changed, and then it's taken me in ways I never dreamed possible.
But you know what I'm saying? When it changed, you take that moment to say, wow, it's changing. But if you know that it's right, it's unbelievable. I was trying to remember the first time you and I met was on the phone when you were working for Maestro Silipini in Jersey.
Right. I was chorus master.
You were conducting. Right. And that, I believe, is how you and I met. In fact, I think somebody had told me about you, saying, you've got to meet Jason. You guys will absolutely, you'll get along. You'll have a great time. You think about singing in a similar way. And then I think you sent me an email about one of the artists on the ride. I said, that's Jason Tramm. It's the first time we met. That's a long time ago.
Go back to at least 2005, 2004. Yeah.
Oh, easily. But I just look at the way things happened for me. When Paul had to regroup because he was having financial situations and it was better for him, to be out on his own, he was so kind. He let me take all the roster of the people that I brought, along. People like Alan Glassman and Andrea and a number of other people. And I started my own. And that is how Randsman Artist Management was born. Funny, I went home and felt sorry for myself. I remember it for about an hour. And then every single one of my singers called me and said, oh no, we're not going anywhere. We're going to stay with you. Just, start Randsman Artists. I'm like, really? It's daunting. And it just all of a sudden the energy rebooted because, when you're scared and you're unsure of what's going to be, you're not sure. And it was just so exciting. I remember the next day, Lenore Rosenberg, because, I had told her the day before, I'm no longer at Cote Artists. And so, from here's my roster. The next day, Lenore, she's the best. She's a friend, and she was just fantastic working, collaborating with her. She emails me the next day. I remembered about something, I think about Alan Glassman. So it was like, I thought, oh, I can do this. And then I think was it Glimmerglass, Atlanta up, and then all of a sudden I said, okay, this is real. So you can do it in any form you need and want to. And this brings me to what's going on today. For the past 2 weeks, I've been using this cliche. I'm filled with cliches. Remember, I'm not 25, although you wouldn't know, right? The new normal. And I keep talking to my singers on my roster and the people I do consultations with and the people I work on role preparation with. There's a new normal. And I'm feeling like certain people, many artists, are, like I have been, struggling with dealing with our new normal. But I have to, number one, applaud anyone, like I'm applauding you. Look what you did. You had tons of probably performances all over the world, conducting new productions, orchestral engagements that are probably postponed for next season. But instead of caving, you said, hey, I'm going to do this. And now, look at what's going on for you with this. But I'm also looking at singers who are doing porch recitals. One of my clients did a magnificent porch recital. And
he'll be on the show later on in September. He's on the show.
Oh, wonderful.
Jason
wonderful. Well, Jason Dweika, my wonderful Verdi baritone. But everyone on my roster is wonderful. That's why I didn't want to say a name, but because I feel equally about everybody. But what I'm saying is, in speaking to each one of the artists that I deal with, and also a lot of the master classes I've been doing on Skype or on Zoom, it took a few days to get used to it because I love doing things live, being there with people. But as soon as I adjusted to it and the idea of giving these master classes now on Zoom, and there was one that I did was at the University of Kentucky. There was, about 25 or 30, and I've done a number of them. And I'm having so much fun. And now I'm doing work sessions on either FaceTime or Zoom. And I'm talking to the singers because many of them are feeling blue, like we all are, like the entire world is. And my thought is, my mother, Bernice Randsman, had this way of turning things around. Whenever I would call her about something negative, she said, Peter, I'm not trying to negate your feelings about it, but feel your feelings and realize that from bad comes good. There's a cliche for you. And I've lived my life that way. And until the day she left the earth, even when she was 86, I would call her and she would talk it through and make me realize that it's like, even though the thing that feels like bad, and let's face it, this pandemic and what's happening, we don't need to go into details. We know it's bad, but I'm not going to sit and only think about that. I want to be able to make music. So after getting over that shock, it's a new
I could tell you from this show came out of the sitting home alone with my thoughts, and I said, I wonder what my colleagues are going through. And like Peter Randsman, let's see what Peter Randsman's doing in this time period. Let's see what various conductors, opera singers. I had a sitar player on a couple days ago. It's just fascinating, and I love the innovation that's occurring.
Listen, everyone became so creative in such a. You're absolutely right. I go on Facebook and they have their own shows. Each one different. Each one with a different flavor and a different cause. I love no two shows right now are the same. Not to mention the performances. There are people now that are just singing musical theater. You know what I'm saying? Musical theater songs that are poignant and beautiful. There are others that are singing operatic pieces. There are others that are singing pieces that are new and they're trying them out and they want feedback from people. And it's taken all these different shapes to just shape our business, and then we have singers worried about, well, what are we going to do in the fall because I can't foretell the future. I am not Madame Flora. You know what I mean? I am not Madame Flora. I can't tell you the future, but I know one thing. If there's a situation, for whatever reason, and we're hoping not, knock on wood, Kenahura, that there are not the usual 50, 60 auditions from September through December 19th, there will be a new normal. I'm not letting it worry me. And, the artists that I'm working with are calming down. They're feeling more at ease and more empowered to use the tools of their techniques from their teachers now to study new arias, to fix arias they've been working on that might have gotten a little, you know what I mean, stale. I don't mean that in a bad way, just old habits creep in, and rework them and make new videos, put them up as a tool, that magic word, a tool, on their websites. And I don't know this, and I'm not predicting, I'm saying maybe just like with when you get concert work as an agent, we give them the websites. They get to watch videos of singers, and many of the concert casting directors will hire from that. Well, I believe possibly, I don't know, that some opera companies might start considering, if they have casting needs that are coming right up, if they're unable to come to New York, to start looking at really good videos of people doing their best recently, not from 8 years ago. They'll probably want to see something from the past 4 months. And this is what I'm trying to do.
And we've seen like less auditions, more people remote. Business travel, I think, was already on the way. It was a little curtailed, and now I think we're going to see a shift in that the entire industry as we move forward. I mean, there'll never be anything like live auditions, but I think it's certainly now becoming more important to do remote auditions because of the pandemic and the travel restrictions.
I absolutely agree with you. And the thing is, now more than ever, I'm working with my clients and also consulting clients and people that I prep for arias and auditions. Instead of calling them audition aria sessions, it's recorded session arias. It's also important that you don't post on your website a pretty good version of you singing, Sempre Libera. It's got to be the best you can conceivably do. So if your manager or your consultant or your teacher or your coach says it's not your best, instead of freaking out, information is power. Oh, so many cliches out of this mouth. But it's true, and then you re-record it. You re-record it because it's going to be vital, and more than ever, whatever you post on your website has got to be fully comprehensive. What I mean is French, German, Italian, contemporary, Russian, Czech, and have them all there. And whatever your support team of your manager or a consultant or your teacher tells you is not up to your usual best, take it down. I know it's sometimes frustrating for an artist and even upsetting, even emotionally upsetting to think, I worked so hard to get that done. But if your support team is saying, especially this year, let's try another one, don't let it get in your way. Just on to the next thing. But I just think that it's our new normal now. And we're going to be doing concerts and auditions and business meetings and consultations, and people will be working with their coaches, and they are, where they have that program now where the pianist can be in one place and the voice teacher in another place and the artist in another. Who would have ever thought?
I just got hired to do my first live concert since my last concert was I guess it was in the end of February. I just got booked for my first concert. I'm putting together an orchestral performance in the Tillis. It's going to be in Long Island, back to Long Island. And it's going to be, I think what I read today was that the audience is going to be in their cars. We're going to be outdoors on a sound stage, recorded, and they're going to put it over the radio into their cars.
Talk about getting creative. And one quick story for you, I can't leave it out. You brought up the Tillis Center. When I was a little kid, when I first started going to the opera, I used to go to Eisenhower Park for the summer operas with La Selva or with remember, Vincent La Selva, he would have New York Grand Opera. You remember, he would come to Eisenhower Park in East Meadow, Long Island. Then there was National Grand Opera, which was Michael Scuderi, his wife Helen Scuderi, and then eventually his son, Vincenzo. Everything went full circle. Vincenzo became my client, got to sing at Lyric Opera of Chicago, Verona, all over the world. But then I became the artistic director of National Grand Opera at the Tillis Center. So when you said the Tillis Center, I think back about the different seats that I've had in my career. You see, so there I was. It was for a full year, and we did Carmen and we did Traviata. That Tilla Center. Well, you won't be inside. You're going to be
At
outside.
least for this one, we're going to be outside because of the restrictions and the. I think this is going to be the first live performance in the region that I know of. I mean, symphonic performance.
Jason, congratulations! Wait until you do inside that.
I've been in there. It's gorgeous.
It's a really, and it's got a wonderful. But you've done perform. I think you've conducted in there. Yeah, gorgeous. I might have seen you there a few times. Yeah, but the acoustics are surprisingly good. But it just, when you said that, it just reminded me how in our careers and our lives, they're each little chapter. And it's like, I forgot that I ran an opera company for a year. And, it's all a dress rehearsal for what I'm doing now. I feel like each one of those things that I had done that were in the performing arts in one way or another was a dress rehearsal for being able to do what I love. And there's nothing more exciting than working with performing artists, than connecting with them and putting together strategically and deciding with them the arias that work best for them, the arias that should be put on hold, the arias that aren't right now, that will wait on maybe a year or two. It's just so exciting.
Whenever I've spent time with you, Peter, I'm always so impressed by how much you love whatever you're doing. Whether it's a consultation for a young singer who's just getting their feet almost into the business, whether it's a singer in career, it doesn't matter to you. You just love being immersed in the performing arts, or whether it's going to Broadway or the Met. Every time you do, you're just surrounded by what you enjoy, and it makes, I think, it's a joy to be around you because you love this art form so much.
God, thank you so much. But you're an inspiration too, because you see the business aspect of it still is musical. You see what I'm saying? Everything to you too. You and I see it in a similar way. And that's why when we're hanging out and we're together, we're of the same mind. You know what's interesting? I don't know how much time I have. Another quick story. I teach a series of classes up at Your Year Studios. Dear Your Year, may she rest in peace. Many of you out there, we know Your Year. And a very dear friend of mine, Mitchell Serker, one of the finest opera coaches in the business. And
great shout out to Mitch Serker. Hey, Mitch.
Hey, Mitch. And Mitchell every year invites me once or even twice a year to be part of the Your Year Studios masterclasses, which has very impressive agents, casting directors, one after another. I'm always honored to be there. But what you just said made me think about something. Sometimes in those classes, there are people that might have just sung in Bayreuth the year before, and that's exciting. Or people prepping roles in major companies. But many times, once or twice a night even possibly, there'll be someone who's maybe an amateur singer who's taking lessons, and they just love to sing because of what it does for them, Jason. And they get up and they sing an aria, and my heart sinks because I think to myself, what am I going to do with them? Because they are here. And then I think to myself, this person, although they're not a professional and although they don't have a career, the reason I said my heart sinks is I'm worried I won't be able to give them enough of what it is I do to help them. It has nothing to do with them. I'm not judging them. I want to make that clear. And what I think to myself is, okay, I am just going to work through and see if I can give them the same tools I'll give someone singing a La Scala. And it is just so exciting. And these are people who say, Peter, I'm not a professional singer. I've been taking voice lessons for 3 years. I have a job. I'm a lawyer. I don't see myself even being on the stage at any time soon, maybe in a chorus at a smaller local company. And I'm like, that's fine. If you want to sing, let's go to work. And you know what? It's what you just said, which I greatly appreciate. I look at them no different and treat them and work with them in the same way, because to me, those tools that we share, that information that we share, and all of a sudden they start singing so much better. It's just joyous. So for me, I really don't care what level anyone is at. When I do consultations, when I do preparation with people, I don't care what level. I don't care if they're at a beginning level, because I feel like if we're generous of spirit enough to share information and tools that are going to give the person who's doing the singing enough information to get where they want to be, then I've done what's expected of me, because I'm always worried, will I be able to give the other people what they need? I mean, even for an interview like this, when I teach a masterclass, I become nervous because it's like, will I represent what I want to and give to the other people something that makes sense?
You know, it's just a frame of mind. It's a way of being. It's just who you are as a person. And I want to thank you so much for being on the show. Peter, how can people find out more about you and your company?
They can just go to my website, randsman.com, randsman.com. And I'm there if anybody wants to reach me for any reason, whether it be for a consultation or for a role preparation or whatever they want. For any reason, you can reach me at randsman@aol.com. That's my email address, or through my website.
Well, thank you so much. I wish you the best. I look forward to seeing you soon. We got to bring you down here to the shore one of these days. We always have such great conversations when we're down here.
Oh, I hope so. Jason, this went by like 1 minute.
We'll do this again.
So much fun. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you're doing for our community. And thank you, and have a fantastic day. Take care.
Thank you for joining us on Music Matters 2020 on our unique podcast community where we delve into the issues in classical music and we explore them through the eyes of distinguished guests. If you like what you hear, please like our video, subscribe to us on YouTube, and hit that bell for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. If you'd like to support the work we're doing here, please consider becoming a Patreon patron. This is for a lot of the artists these days, patreon.com/mm2020 if you'd like to support. And the first 5 Patreon members will get a t-shirt, looks like this, and a coffee mug, looks like this, so you can help build our community. And as we bring new guests in, we have a guest tomorrow. It was supposed to be Jace Saplan from Hawaii, a very wonderful choral conductor, but there's a very big storm in Hawaii, so Jace is going to be rescheduled for August 22nd, and we have Metropolitan Opera conductor Gregory Buchalter, who will be here tomorrow at 6 p.m. So thank you very much, people, and thank you for joining our community, and remember, keep music alive. Good night.